everybody. Welcome. This is a wonderful study I get to do today. I'm going to continue in Mark, and we're going to do the resurrection. Now, I know you just heard this, some of you, and this is just to go over it. Hopefully, the questions, if you've already heard it, just wait and wait through this 15, 20 minutes and get to the questions. After this week, though, I will be teaching the text that I'm preaching before you hear it, so you'll be getting the Bible study of the text before you hear it on the Sunday rather than after. All right. So we have Mark. Mark is the amazing resurrection motif in the sense of we don't actually meet Jesus. Now you say, well, hold on, Emery, I've read all of Mark, and yeah, you read some of what we have of Mark that's been given to us by some of the modern interpreters, but the fact is that Mark 16 ends in verse 8. All the early manuscripts testify this. All scholarship agrees. The reason some scribe added after 8 on was because the ending didn't seem sensible to him, because I don't think the scribe or scribes at this case may have understood. It's no big deal, the rest of 16, because it's just cut and paste out of Matthew and other spots. But it doesn't fit Mark. The Greek's different. It doesn't make any sense to a very tightly crafted Bible study. Gospel. So anyways, so we're going to go 1 to 8, and we're going to talk about this. And what stands out right away is you don't have an actual resurrection appearance of Jesus. And I think that's all part of Mark's literary talents here, okay? So let's get into it. It was Sabbath was past. Mary Magdalene, the mother, and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. So you've got the witnesses coming, and they're coming to anoint him. Why do they do this? They can't do it on the Sabbath. They have to wait until early in the morning. So they're going to come and do the very normal burial practices that should have been done before. And very early on the first day of the week, first day of the week, whenever you hear that, you can't help but hear new creation. The resurrection represents new creation. That's why the church meets on Sunday, not Saturday. Saturday is the Sabbath, the seventh day of the old. The new creation comes in, and that's why the church has always done that. When the sun had risen, they went to the tomb, and they were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? Very heavy stone. It is perplexing to me that they would even go there without male help, but they did to do their job, and maybe they were hoping someone would be there. Anyways, and looking up, they saw that a stone was rolled back. That must have been very startling for them. Maybe they thought someone knew somebody was in there for a reason. And it was very large. There were very large rocks. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in the white robe. Right side means a place of authority, power, truth. He's sitting on the right side. He's dressed in a white robe. This guy's not glowing in the dark. He's a young man, but that's often how angels are presented in the Old and the New Testament, so that's not new. The interesting is the white robe. White robes were, in the Old Testament, you can go to Ecclesiastes in different spots. Every time they were going to have a celebration, they put on white robes. So he's dressed as part of a celebration, and isn't that the truth with what happened? And it says they were alarmed. So we get into this alarmed fear component, and this is going to help us to understand what Mark's doing with this empty tomb appearance, all right? And he said to them, do not be afraid. That's the words afraid, not alarmed. It's an unfortunate translation because it's a really important, that will be important later. You seek Jesus of Nazareth. He uses the words Jesus of Nazareth. Now, why does he use that? He doesn't usually use that. Well, Mark is a literary genius. He starts the gospel with a demonized man calling out this name, Jesus of Nazareth. He ends with an angel proclaiming Jesus of Nazareth. He starts from the brokenness, the idolatrous Israel, to redeemed Israel. You've got the spiritual reality changing. The announcement at the beginning was a demonized man, and it's the beginning of John's gospel. And of course, by the end of the gospel, the crucifixion, the world's changed, and now we have the good news messengers of God announcing that this is Jesus of Nazareth. You seek Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. And then he says, he has risen, he is not here. That must have been shocking language. He's been telling them this is going to happen. They have clearly not believed this is going to happen. This must have been shocking because this changes everything. People back then didn't rise from the dead. They just didn't. There's an idea that people got confused because they didn't know people really died. And so Jesus wasn't really dead, but he kind of got better. That is such obnoxious foolishness from a modernist mind that these ancients didn't understand, that death, you don't come back. And so this is stunning to them. And then he goes, see the place where they laid them. Now we get to this part. But go tell his disciples. Now, here are these 3 women, and they're called to go and tell the disciples and Peter. Now, that's shocking. If you want to know why, one of the reasons, rationally, I know these Gospels were not written by people to create a religion, is they would never have had females in that time and in that place and in that culture be the ones that would go and preach. They just wouldn't, to go proclaim. They weren't even allowed to bear testimony in that time because they were considered too emotional. That's the time. I don't agree with it, but just do you know. So the fact that he tells them to go and tell Peter that he is going before you, Jesus is going before them to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you. Now, this is all an amazing thing. These women are there. Now, what are they going to do? Now, it's interesting. And they went out and fled from the tomb. They ran. It's very interesting. They didn't walk out. They fled from the tomb. For trembling and astonishment had seized them. This is language that's right out of Isaiah, and we'll explain why that's important. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And then that ends. You can see why the scribe goes, well, that's not a good ending. We need to have a Jesus moment. But actually, if you understand Mark's gospel from the beginning, like they would have understood it, then you'd understand why he ends with this trembling and astonishment, and then he ends with this fear and the challenge, would they say anything? And it says they said nothing to anyone. Now, the readers of Mark knows that they did actually, but he ends it with when they don't, when they haven't yet, because they're afraid. Because Mark's gospel is written after Paul's epistles, so clearly they know these women thankfully went out and told them that there was a risen Christ. So why would he end it like that? He knows that. Well, it's interesting. Again, understanding Mark's gospel, you have to understand it's based on 2 particular prophets, Isaiah and Malachi. I taught this from the beginning. He quotes them at the beginning, and there are 2 themes that are going on. From Isaiah 40 to 66 is what's called the promise of Exodus, the new Exodus that was promised to Israel back then when they were in exile. And it starts off, comfort, comfort my people. And Mark has basically said, well, that Exodus, which didn't happen in Isaiah's time, is happening now. This is the time of the Exodus. Now, throughout Isaiah, there's a challenging component as to why, and it's the reason why that Exodus didn't happen during Isaiah's time, is because it says that they did not agree with how God was going to do it. He sent the wrong deliverer, in that case Cyrus. They didn't do their things right, and they were afraid. They were afraid. They were afraid to trust God to go out on this Exodus, to trust him with who he was going to deliver them with. And ultimately it ends, Isaiah, with this quite dissatisfaction of God, basically saying, you're kind of condemned because you don't trust me, all right? Well, by Malachi, of course, we know that they know about this promised Exodus in Isaiah, and it still hasn't happened, and they are grumbling against Yahweh, and Yahweh has said back to them, like they're saying, why haven't you delivered us? And Yahweh's saying, well, because if I delivered you right now, you'd be destroyed. And that's the big day of the Lord stuff. And he says, but there will be a day of the Lord. This Exodus is coming, and you got to better choose who you're going to side with. Well, Mark's gospel up till now has all been about the new Exodus of Isaiah and the day of the Lord of Malachi, all coming in together with Jesus, okay? And it's all been coming through right to the cross. And it doesn't seem that Israel is any better than the Malachi Israel or Isaiah's Israel. In other words, the time of Jesus, this day of the Lord's coming upon Israel, and it's going to be, as we know from the Olivet Discourse, the peak of it's going to be the destruction of the temple and the whole system. Now, we're in this resurrection moment, and the new Exodus has now happened because Jesus Christ has come out of the tomb. And as we know as Christians and New Testament listeners, that the new Exodus is represented as an exodus out of sin, death, and evil, not just out of a country, and that's what he brought. The question is, are we going to accept this? Well, let's go back to Isaiah and remember where they failed, okay? So first note that in Isaiah it says, do not fear, more times than in any prophet. I'll just give you an example here. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, my offspring, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you who I took from the ends of the earth and called you from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. Behold, all who are incensed against you shall be put to shame and confounded. Those who strive against you shall be as nothing and shall perish. You shall seek those who contend with you, but you shall not find them. Those who war against you shall be as nothing at all. For I, the Lord, your God, where am I here? Hold you with my right hand. Is it I, who says, fear not, I am the one who helps you. Fear not, you worm Jacob, you men of Israel. I am the one who helps you, so declares the Lord. Your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel. Fear not, 3 times in that one section, throughout the whole of Israel. And all of this is this promise of redemption, but they have to trust him. They have to trust him. They have to trust him. They have to trust him just like they were supposed to trust, that these disciples are supposed to trust Jesus. But the promise of this deliverance is wrapped up in fearing not, trusting in him. Okay? And ultimately, the other mistake they made in Isaiah's time, which Malachi also has, is they refused to proclaim because of their fear the goodness of this God. All right? So you got this. Go up to the high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength. You hear this proclamation, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. This is a command of God to go and announce this. Lift it up, and what does he say? Fear not. So there's a connection between proclaiming and fear. So something you're going to proclaim is going to be something that you may fear in the culture around you. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Israel, during Isaiah's time, did not take him up on that. They lived in fear, they did not trust, and he could not bring the Exodus. In Malachi's time, they feared, they did not trust, they did not get the day of the Lord. Now here's Mark's gospel. It's all throughout trust in Jesus. This is the God that's delivered you. Fear not, fear not, fear not. And he ends this with a story about an empty tomb, a young man telling them to go and proclaim, just like Isaiah did to this Exodus community, or potentially Exodus community, because the true Exodus has come. And their job now is to be Israel. He's actually making these women and giving them the same assignment that he had given ancient Israel, to go and proclaim the good news that there is an empty tomb, that there is a Jesus to be met. The question is then, will they do this, or will they be afraid? Now, he ends with these women walking the way of Israel, right? In Isaiah's time. They walk away, they don't proclaim, and they're in fear. They have to make a choice, and that's what Mark's leaving us with. His goal is not to give us a resurrection appearance of Jesus, though he absolutely believed it. He wants to leave us with the challenge of these women. Are we going to be like them and afraid and run away and not proclaim, or are we going to trust God? Because all of us, and Mark's gospel, by the time of Mark's gospel, most of the people hadn't met Jesus. They hadn't met the resurrected. We all have to trust in an empty tomb, a story about it. We have to have somebody who tells us about the empty tomb, who's not afraid to tell a story that from this world's perspective is crazy. And Mark is ending this gospel, laying forth, are we going to be like this, or are we going to follow the right way? He leaves this as a hanging point. They all know these women overcame their fear. They all know that these women ultimately would go and proclaim. And that's why the new Exodus came to all of us, because they were able to do that. The challenge in Mark's gospel is there is an empty tomb. Don't be like Isaiah's Israel, or Malachi's Israel, or the Israel of Jesus' day. Be bold. Trust in this God who's delivered you, and go and proclaim. That's the component of this story. Questions? First question I think we have to ask is, why would the resurrection create fear in these women? What does it mean, the resurrection? It does mean some things for them and the world around them. What would cause fear to an empty tomb? Obviously, it'd be that, wow, the world, people die and stay dead, and now there isn't. There would be any natural fear of a change like that. But what does the resurrection mean? And I'm going to go a little further in this and give you a hint. How does the resurrection judge this world? And ultimately, how does the world receive the language of resurrection? And why does that create fear in those who might proclaim it? All right. Second question, and this one I might get in trouble for, but just to create conversation, what does it say that women were the first preachers of the resurrection in a world that didn't? What is our call then, with that in mind, as the church post-resurrection? What is our call? If these women are an example, what is our call, and what might restrict us from fulfilling that call? Finally, when it says believers live by faith, how might that correlate with the empty tomb and the living Christ? That's a tough question. I don't mean it to be, but living by faith means something. What does it mean with us who haven't seen or touched the resurrected body? What does Jesus mean when he told us, better those who believe and have not seen? And what does it have to do with the empty tomb and the living Christ? Think about that. Give it some thought. Hopefully, I'm not too opaque in these questions. And my hope is to just create conversation. If you have questions for me, please, again, folks, send them to me through your leader or whoever. I'm happy to answer questions during this time for any questions somebody might have that you just feel like the group wants to have answered. All right? Blessings. Have a great day.